Welcome to the second episode of The Road to Tropico 7, and this time we have to talk about eras. Now, the eras are a relatively new concept to the Tropico franchise. Technically, they were introduced with Tropico 4, but really became a stay with Tropico 5, and then it was also in Tropico 6, and now it looks like we will get the same thing again in Tropico 7. By the way, if they should decide against eras in Tropico 7, I'm not really mad about it, and you will find out in a second here. So let's talk about the whole system. Eras themselves have basically two means of why they exist. The first one is they slowly want to introduce you to certain gameplay elements and mechanics without you being overwhelmed by all the systems. The second reason is to make every playthrough a little bit more interesting. And while the first one works really good, and I think they figured that out just with the first iteration of the eras, the second part is falling flat quite a bit. So let's have a look at the first era, which is the colonial era. And unfortunately, this is the worst era in my opinion, because if you have never played Tropico, quick explanation, in the colonial era, you are not owning Tropico. You are not owning your island. You are just there on the mandate of the crown, and that mandate is running out. And yes, there are ways on how you can extend the mandate, but nonetheless, this puts a timer on you. Think about that for a second. You're a new Tropico player. You are trying to learn the ropes. You are trying to understand how this all works. Or even worse, this is one of your first strategy games you are playing. And the first thing you see is, hey, by the way, you have about an hour for this. If you cannot make it, that's game over for you. And you have to start from the beginning. So, good luck. That's not really what you want. That feels just rushed. It feels like you are under pressure. And I saw a lot of people who just said, yeah, you know what? Oh, this is not for me. And now some people might think, well, maybe it's for the veteran players. Well, why would you put something in the game right at the beginning which is meant for veteran players, right? That doesn't really make too much sense. But as a veteran player, I can tell you this whole system is absolutely boring. Like, I know how to get out of the colonial era. I know how to not lose my mandate easily, and I do that in my sleep. And even worse, in the first era, this is the beginning. This is where you lay out the foundation for your Tropico, and there's not really much to do, actually. Like, a lot of the buildings are not unlocked yet, and even like some of the meaningful stuff is just coming around with the World Wars era and not really in the first one. So, as a veteran player, I can tell you, often or not, I just skip that era. I just start immediately in the World Wars because the first one is boring. It's not really that interesting. So, what can they do? Well, first of all, remove the timer. Like, just remove that. We don't need that. What they can do instead is they can put in meaningful quests, and if you do them or don't, you will get buffs and debuffs depending on if you want to please the crown or not, or if you want to just pursue your freedom. But the whole thing with, oh yeah, after 30 minutes, if you couldn't secure another mandate, it's game over for you. You better have a save, or even better, you start from the beginning. Like, get that out of here. There are also better places for this whole system. So let's talk about the World Wars and the Cold Wars. Now you might think, well, World Wars and the Cold War, not the Cold Wars, it's just one Cold War. Like, what do you mean? That's two different eras. Yeah, but they are super similar. Like, seriously, they're basically the same, which has to change, in my opinion. And let's have a look at the World Wars. And the idea of the World Wars and even the Cold War is that you have to choose a side. You have to choose a faction. In the World Wars, well, you have to choose the Allies or the Axis, Or in the Cold War, you have to choose the West or the UdSSR. And you might think, oh, that's cool. That probably gives you a lot of variations in your playthrough and gives you some interesting choices. Unfortunately, it's none of that. How it works is pretty simple. You choose one of the factions, then you just get a quest, which is, by the way, always the same. And the only thing you are deciding on is which of the two quest lines you want to do this time. But nothing else changes, nothing else matters. And that's pretty boring. Like, why not actually make it interesting? When you are choosing a faction, you actually have to work for the victory. And this is where they actually could put in a timer and say, okay, so it's the World Wars. Both factions need like a lot of stuff. Produce those items for them in a certain time. If you don't make it, well, if you do it too often, your faction will lose. And when you lose the war for the next era, you will face some repercussions, right? Like the new factions remember you and they don't like you that much, or you're getting some debuffs or something like that, right? They could actually do something which has a lasting effect on you and is meaningful and make it more interesting to actually work for your faction, because you could win or actually lose. And I know what some people might think here, but Mo, when the Axes are winning, like, that's not historically accurate. Oh, come on. As if Tropico was ever historically accurate. Like, you literally playing an undying being going through the times with El Presidente. Like, reality is not really a friend of the Tropico franchise. That's just how it is. And what they also could do is, when you are choosing one of the factions, you are getting special buildings. Buildings you would not get if you're choosing the other faction, right? And that would really spice up and change your playthrough. Or what they could also do is, depending on the faction you were choosing, you will focus on certain particular aspects of the game. Like, let's say in the Cold War, when you were choosing the West, you were focusing more on production of leisure, right? And last but not least, tourist, because I'm pretty sure tourists will be back. And if you were choosing the UdSSR, you were focusing more on food, on actual like production itself, and then you're maybe focusing on science instead. Like, make it interesting that I have to choose one of the two sides, or maybe go crazy. Maybe just say, no, Tropico stays neutral, which makes things so much more difficult. But if you manage that in the next age, you will have a huge advantage, right? So I would really love to see some changes here. And that leads us to the last era, and that is the modern age. And I have to say, weirdly enough, the modern age is definitely one of those eras where I think they nailed that, because, well, basically the modern era was most of the time the go-to era in the Tropico games, right? And they kind of nailed that. So there isn't really much that can change here, besides of, I would love to see, now that you are in the last era, that you have like all the debuffs, all the buffs, all the buildings, all the decisions you actually made are now coming together, and they matter the most here, right? That's what I would love to see. And there is one more other thing I would really love to see, and that is, please don't do what you did in Tropico 6 with giving us tons of tropical factions and also tons of nations you have to traverse. It was far too much. Like, you are dealing with mostly just two factions on the international stage and about four factions at home. And then you are getting into the modern age, and it's just, here are 10 nations and 10 internal factions you now have to manage. And especially in Tropico 6, it was always so weird that, let's say, you were doing something with Europe, and then Japan would be pissed. right? Or the Middle East. And it's like, why would they be pissed because I'm trading like some food or something with Europe? Like, it was such a weird thing. And the same goes with the internal factions. Like, most of the time, they they were completely meaningless, right? The only faction you didn't want to piss off was the military faction because they could stage a coup, and but everything else was so meaningless. And yes, we would talk about the factions and all that in a later video and doing a deep dive there. But as I said, like, please make the eras meaningful or cut back on them, or if you really have to, just remove them entirely if you cannot make it interesting. Like, the whole idea of not giving people all the stuff immediately is a good one, but the rest, yeah, you have to figure out, because I think Tropical 5 was one of those games where you had the feeling, okay, this was their first time, they were trying to figure out stuff. And then Tropical 6 didn't really make a lot of changes to it. And this was already the second try, and you kind of hope that something would happen. So I really hope the magical number is 3 here, and we will get some big changes to the eras. With that said, I will be back with more episodes very soon. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a like and also share it with others. And more importantly, if you're new to the channel, you want to see more videos down the line and enjoy some strategy games, building and management games, which is what we are focusing on here, then you might want to subscribe. With that said, thanks so much for watching. Stay safe. Bye-bye.